When Joe Louis and Max Schmeling fought, it was more than just two boxing matches. The world was on the brink of war, and the two fighters symbolized opposite sides of an increasingly polarized world. On one side, you had the rising star Joe Louis, representing the United States and the free world. On the other side, you had Max Schmeling, representing Nazi Germany and their belief of Aryan superiority. As the two fighters clashed and exchanged blows, they not only fought to be heavyweight champion of the world, but they also fought for the pride of their nation. Join me on this journey to learn about how two boxing matches in the 1930s would be the prelude to the greatest conflict in human history. Born in Prussia in 1905, Max began boxing in 1924 and then became heavyweight champion of the world in 1930, winning the title when then champion Jack Sharkley was disqualified after committing a foul by hitting him underneath his belt in the fourth round of the fight. Max held the title for 2 years before losing it in 1932. After a loss to Max Baer in 1933, many people considered Schmeling to be out of his prime, especially when he lined up to face Joe Louis in 1936 at the age of 31. Joe Louis. Born in Alabama in 1914, Louis was the grandchild of former slaves. By 1926, Joe Louis and his family moved to Detroit after intimidation by the Ku Klux Klan. Joe Louis began his boxing career in 1932 at the age of 17 and became a professional in 1934. By the time 1936 rolled around, he had a record of 24-0 and was seen as a rising superstar in boxing and an icon for Black Americans. For many in the boxing world, Joe Louis's match with Max was considered to be the final step in his bid to become heavyweight champion of the world. The first fight. On June 19, 1936, the number one contender Joe Louis faced off against the number two contender and former champion Max Schmeling at Yankee Stadium in the Bronx, New York. Due to his previous time as champion, Max Schmeling was well known to the American public. Coupled with the rising stardom of the Braun Bomber, this fight sold out and had 57 million people tune in on their radios. Louis was a 10-1 favorite to beat Max. Due to these odds and his confidence, Joe Louis did not take the fight seriously and spent more time playing golf than training. Schmeling, on the other hand, was considered out of his prime by most, but he still wanted to reclaim his spot as champion of the world. Schmeling began to analyze film of Joe Louis' fights, which he is credited as being one of the first boxers to study film of his opponent and proclaimed to the public that he has discovered a weakness in Louis' style and found the key to victory. Tensions were also rising between the two nations that each fighter represented, especially with the 1936 Olympics coming up in August. The German chancellor was eager to show the United States and the world proof of his ideology and genetic superiority and supremacy of the Aryan race. The weakness that Schmeling discovered was that Louis carried his left hand low after throwing a jab, leaving him open to counters. Every time Louis would throw a punch, Schmeling would counter with hard rights the entire fight. The match took a turn in favor of Schmeling in the fourth round when he landed a hard right hand on Louis' chin, sending him to the canvas for the first time in his career. Round after round, Schmeling put on a stellar boxing exhibition, hurting Louis in the process with constant hard counters. Finally, in round 12, with a vicious body and jaw shot combo, the unthinkable happened. Joe Louis was knocked out and suffered his first professional loss. After the fight, Schmeling professed his love for his countrymen and dedicated the victory to his nation. The Nazi regime made Schmeling's victory a propaganda campaign, despite the fact that the boxer was not a member of the party, nor did he like them. Controversy. After knocking out the number one contender, Max was in talks to fight current champion James Braddock for the title. Talks, however, broke down for several reasons. One reason is that Braddock would have made 10 times more money fighting Joe Louis rather than Max. Relations between Germany and the United States had been declining, and the United States did not want to give Nazi Germany another propaganda victory, as everyone knew Braddock would lose to Max. With Schmeling as world champion, it is very likely that Nazi Germany would also prevent an American fighter from getting another shot at the title. So Joe Louis ended up getting the fight despite being knocked out by Schmeling. Louis knocked out Braddock in the 8th round, becoming the heavyweight champion of the world on June 22, 1937. Interestingly enough, Joe Louis announced publicly that he refused to recognize himself as world champion until he avenged his loss to Schmeling. Fight 2. Despite saying he wouldn't feel like a champion until he beat his German rival, Lewis made Schmeling wait nearly 2 years for their rematch. During this time, Max had remained relatively idle, fighting only 3 fights compared to Lewis's 11 since their last match. Schmeling also became the face of propaganda put up by the Third Reich, but Max hated this, especially since he had a Jewish manager and said, "I am a fighter, not a politician. I'm no Superman in any way." Regardless of his statements, the American public's opinion of Schmeling began to sour as Germany continued to grow hostile on the global scene. The publicists that the Nazi Party forced to travel with Max made comments like, "A black man couldn't defeat Schmeling," which further stroked resentment and racial undertones to their upcoming match. The two met again on June 22, 1938, with Schmeling representing a government and ideology he didn't like, while Lewis proudly took on the mantle of representing the American people. Learning from his prior mistakes and arrogance, Lewis took his training seriously, giving up golf and women. Schmeling used the same strategy that won him the first match, while Lewis' strategy was to get the fight over with quickly. As soon as the bell rang, Lewis unleashed a volley of shots at Schmeling, throwing powerful headshots, overwhelming the aged German. Lewis knocked Schmeling down 3 times before the referee ended the fight. Lewis avenged his loss with one of the worst beatings in heavyweight history. Joe Louis landed 31 of his 41 punches, while Schmeling was only able to throw 2 punches in total. Schmeling suffered severe injuries, including several cracked vertebrae in his back, and had to stay in the hospital for 10 days. Schmeling was beaten so decisively that the president of the New York Boxing Commission went to the hospital to see if his injuries were real and that he didn't throw the fight. Aftermath and legacy. The United States and especially Black America celebrated this decisive victory in the streets. Lewis went on to become a celebrity and is considered to be the first true Black American national hero. It was possibly the first time in American history that the majority of white Americans rooted for a black man over a white man, and a black American being simply referred to as an American. Joe Louis would go down to have 23 consecutive title defenses and be heavyweight champion for over 12 years, which are both records that still stand. While Schmeling recovered from his loss and became the European heavyweight champion in 1939, he was abandoned by the Nazi Party and no longer promoted as a national hero. Both will go on to serve in their nation's military during the Second World War, which began a little over a year after their second match. Schmeling and Lewis would develop a close personal friendship, with Max even sending his former rival money later in life due to Lewis's financial hardships. Max was also one of the pallbearers at Joe Lewis's funeral and covered part of the cost of the funeral. Despite the two men coming from two completely different places in life and at their peak represented two rival nations and ideologies at the brink of a catastrophic war, they were able to put their differences aside and cultivate a friendship, which shows how sports can be a truly beautiful and uniting force. Thank you.